snow falls, wind screams, and in the darkness at 10,000 feet a single fire still burns. Inside, an old man sits motionless before the hearth, rifle across his lap, tin cup empty in his hand, eyes staring into the flames like he's waiting for something, or someone, who will never come. Heaven years, 7 winters, 120 names carved into stone, 3 snow-white ghosts standing outside, blue lips, terrified eyes. No one will let them in, a simple choice. But after this, everything burns. Some winters kill, some doors change everything. And some men have been dead for years but haven't laid down yet. Winter 1858 came to the Wind River Range like a fist through glass. Silent, sudden, brutal. Ezekiel Thornhill didn't hear it arrive because he'd stopped listening 7 years ago. The cabin at 10,000 feet was his coffin. He just hadn't bothered lying down yet. 52 winters behind him. Most men that age had farms, grandchildren, a chair by the fire where they told lies about the old days. Zeke had a Hawken rifle, 3 traps, and conversations with ghosts who never answered back. The wind tonight sounded like Sarah screaming. It always did. He sat in the rocker he'd built for her in 1849. Back when he still believed in things like futures. The wood groaned under his weight. Everything groaned up here. The logs, the snow on the roof, his knees when he stood to check the traps. Even the silence groaned. Because silence this deep wasn't peaceful. It was hungry. It ate memories, chewed them up and spat out the bones. Zeke poked the fire. Sparks rose like tiny, desperate prayers. They died before reaching the chimney hole. He understood. The stew in the iron pot had gone cold an hour ago. Venisons, same as yesterday, same as the day before. Same as every day since he climbed this mountain in 1851 and decided not to come back down. Outside, the wind shrieked. Or maybe that was Sarah again. Hard to tell anymore. He'd stopped distinguishing between what was real and what was memory around year 3. By year 5, he'd stopped caring. Now in year 7, he sometimes forgot. There was supposed to be a difference. The tin cup in his hand was empty. He stared into it anyway. Imagined whiskey. The burn. The brief, beautiful amnesia. But he'd run out of whiskey in 1854. Same year he ran out of reasons. The fire crackled. A log split. Sap hissed. Zeke watched the flames and thought about nothing, because thinking led to remembering and remembering led to the rope in the storage room. And he'd promised Samuel he wouldn't. Not yet. Not until he'd carved all the names. 120 so far. Chiseled into the tunnel wall below the cabin. Every child who'd died, because Augustus Ravencroft decided profit mattered more than lives. Zeke's son was number 47. He carved that one twice, because his hand shook so bad. The first time the letters came out crooked. The wind hit the door. Not the soft push of a breeze, a slam, like something thrown. Zeke's hand went to the rifle, leaning against the wall. Instinct. Muscle memory from his scouting days, when staying alive meant moving before thinking. Another slam, rhythmic, desperate. Someone was pounding on the door. Zeke stood. His joints popped like breaking kindling. 52 felt like 70 up here. The cold got into your bones, made a home. Refused to leave. He crossed the cabin in 4 steps. It wasn't a large space. 12 feet by 12. Everything a man needed. Everything a dead man could tolerate. The pounding continued, frantic now. No animal knocked like that. Animals clawed, scratched, tried to dig under. This was human, which meant trouble. Because humans didn't climb to 10,000 feet in a blizzard, unless something worse than weather was chasing them. Zeke grabbed the rifle, cocked it. The metallic click was the loudest sound in the cabin besides his heartbeat. He threw the bolt, hauled the door open. Wind exploded inward, carrying snow and cold and the smell of wet wool and pine smoke and something else. Fear. 3 figures stood on his threshold, covered in snow, shaking, steam rising off them like they were already ghosts. The tallest stepped forward, a woman, old, her face lined like a map of hard roads, hair gray and white and plastered to her skull. Eyes that had seen too much and somehow kept looking anyway. Behind her, 2 girls. One nearly grown, the other small, both trembling, so violently, their teeth chattered like stones in a jar. The old woman's lips were blue. Her words came out fractured. Frosted, no one will take us in. Zeke just stared. 7 towns. 7 doors closed. The smallest girl swayed. Her knees buckled. The older one caught her. Barely. They say we carry death. The old woman's eyes met Zeke's. Held them. There was no begging in that gaze. Just statement. Fact. The world was one way and this was how it worked, and she was done pretending otherwise. Please, mountain man. The wind howled. Snow swirled between them. The fire inside gutted and sparked. Zeke looked at the small girl, 12. Maybe younger. Same age as Samuel when the fever took him, same dark eyes. Same terror underneath, trying so hard to be brave. Something in Zeke's chest shifted. Not his heart. That had broken years ago. This was different. Deeper. Like bedrock moving. Like a foundation that thought it was solid, discovering it could still change. He stepped back, lowered the rifle. Get inside. Quickly. Before the wind takes the roof. They stumbled over the threshold, brought the storm with them. Snow melted instantly on the warm floorboards. Puddles formed. The old woman pulled the door shut behind her. The wind screamed protest, then cut off. Just the fire crackling. Just their ragged breathing. Zeke pointed at the hearth. Sit. They moved like sleepwalkers. Collapsed near the flames. The old woman kept the small girl tucked against her side. The older girl positioned herself between them and Zeke, protective smart. Zeke opened the chest by the wall. Pulled out 3 buffalo robes. Tossed them over. The old woman caught them. Wrapped the small one first. Then the older girl, then herself, stews cold. Still edible, he ladled it into wooden bowls. Handed them over. They ate without speaking. Desperate, mechanical. Like they hadn't seen food in days, probably hadn't. Zeke sat in his rocker. The rifle across his knees. He watched them. They watched him back, animals in a standoff. Waiting to see who'd move first. The old woman finished her stew. Set the bowl down. Wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. I am Nish Greyhawk. Her English was clear. Clipped. The kind that came from years around trading posts and fort negotiations. This is Dateste, my eldest. And Taba, Detesti. 17, maybe 18. Dark eyes that held no fear, just cold assessment. Calculating whether the mountain man with the rifle was more dangerous than whatever they'd run from. Taba. 12. Buried in buffalo fur. Only her face visible. Round, young. Terrified but trying not to show it. Ezekiel Thornhill, Nish nodded. Like she already knew. Like she'd known before knocking. You're a long way from the southern territories. Apache don't usually wander into Wind River snowdrifts. Not unless they're running from the devil himself. Nishe looked into the fire. The flames danced across her weathered face. Turned the lines into canyons. We are running from a man worse than the devil, Mr. Thornhill. She said the name like a curse. Augustus Ravencroft. The air in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. Zeke's hand tightened on the rifle stock. The name hung there, poisonous. A word that turned good men into corpses, and lawmen into liars. Augustus Ravencroft owned half of Wyoming territory. The other half he was working on. Cattle baron, land grabber. The man who decided who lived and who didn't. And the territorial governor smiled and called him friend. Ravencroft. Zeke's voice was flat. Dead. The way it got when he talked about things that used to matter. Men don't cross Ravencroft and live to talk about it. What did an old Apache woman and her 2 girls do to draw the eye of the biggest cattle baron in Wyoming territory? Nisha's jaw tightened. They say we stole his horses, set fire to his grain silos. Ravencroft put a bounty on our heads. $800. Dead or alive, did you? It was Detest who answered. She pulled a thick leather satchel from beneath her wet tunic, clutched it like a newborn. No, her voice was fierce, sharp. The kind of sharp that cut through lies and excuses and got straight to bone. We stole nothing. We saw something. But Zeke could press further. The wind outside died, completely. 1 second howling. Next second silence, so absolute it hurt. Zeke stood. crossed to the window, pulled back the hide covering. Moonlight poured through the thick glass. The storm had passed. Left behind 3 feet of fresh powder that sparkled like crushed diamonds. Beautiful, deadly. In the mountains, a sudden lull meant one of 2 things. Either the storm was done, or it was gathering strength for round 2. Get some sleep. Zeke pulled the hide back over the window, turned to face them. If Ravencroft's men are tracking you, they lost your trail in this snow. But come morning, they'll be cutting sign at the base of the mountain. You're safe here for the night. Tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive. Nish studied him. Those old eyes seeing past the words to whatever lived underneath. Why help us? Good question. Zeke didn't have a good answer. Because you knocked. Because I opened the door. Because the small one looks like my son. Because I've spent 7 years carving the names of dead children into stone. And maybe just this, once I can stop one from being added to the list. He didn't say any of that. Because you're here. Naishi nodded. Seemed to accept it. She pulled Taba close. Deteste positioned herself between them and the door. The buffalo robes wrapped around all 3. Zeke sat back in his rocker, rifle across his knees. He didn't sleep. Hadn't really slept in 7 years. Just closed his eyes and listened to the ghosts and waited for dawn. Tonight the ghosts were quiet. Maybe they were watching the door too. Dawn broke like a knife through silk. Zeke had the fire going, coffee brewing in the tin pot. The bitter smell filled the cabin, stronger than medicine, blacker than sin. He poured a cup, stepped onto the small porch. His boots crunched on fresh snow. The air was so cold it burned his lungs. Good. Meant he was still alive enough to feel it. The sun hit the peaks, turned them gold, touched the valley below. The snow sparkled, blinding, beautiful. The kind of morning that made men write poems. Zeke hated it because beauty like this was a lie. Underneath the sparkle was, under the ice was rock. Under the rock was nothing, same as people. He scanned the tree line 200 yards downslope. Nothing moved. The blue jays in the lower pines were silent, which meant something was down there making them silent. Zeke's eyes narrowed. Searched. Found it there. A wisp of condensation. Horse breath. Rising above a thicket of blue spruce, they'd found the trail. Zeke stepped back inside. Bolted the door. The sound made Naishi sit up. Deteste's hand went to something under the buffalo robe. Probably a knife. They're here. No panic in his voice. Just fact. The way you'd mention rain, Naishi pulled Taba closer. The girl was still asleep. Didn't know yet that the nightmare had followed them up the mountain. Zeke walked to the locked wooden cabinet. Heavy iron keys on a ring. He opened it. Inside was his arsenal. 2 Colt 1851 Navy revolvers. The Hawken rifle. A smaller percussion rifle. Powder, shot, caps, and one item he hadn't touched in 7 years. A cavalry saber from his scouting days. When he still believed in causes, he left it where it was. Tossed the smaller rifle to Deteste. She caught it one-handed. Checked the lock, the pan, the hammer. Movements so fluid they looked practiced. You know how to use that? Deteste looked up. Her stare was level, unwavering. I know how to kill men who want to kill me, fair enough. Zeke handed a Colt to Naishi. She took it, held it like she'd held guns before. Probably had. Life at the frontier didn't leave much room for people who couldn't protect themselves. Keep Taba in the root cellar, beneath the floorboards. Don't come out until I say. She shook Taba awake. The girl's eyes opened, confused, then terrified as memory caught up. Mama, shh, come. Naishi lifted the heavy woven rug, revealed the trapdoor underneath, pulled it open. Darkness below, earth and cold and the smell of stored turnips. Taba looked at Zeke, then at Deteste, then at her mother. I don't want to go down there, I know, little one. But you must. Naish helped her down the ladder. Taba's small hands gripped the rungs, white-knuckled. She disappeared into the dark. Naishi looked at Zeke one more time. A look that said, if you get my daughters killed, I will haunt you from whatever hell I end up in. She dropped the trapdoor, laid the rug back over it. Outside a voice boomed across the clearing. Hello, the cabin. Zeke recognized the voice. Cole Harrison, former Army scout turned bounty hunter. A man who enjoyed his work far too much. Zeke had crossed paths with him twice. Both times ended with somebody bleeding, not Zeke. He cracked the narrow sliding slot in the oak door, peered out. 4 riders at the edge of the clearing, horses steaming, breath visible. Harrison in front on a big roan, wolfskin coat, rifle resting casual across his saddle. Behind him 3 others. Luther Pike, young, maybe 25, trying to look hard and mostly succeeding. Danny something, early 20s, face still soft, eyes still clear. Hadn't been doing this long, and Jeremiah Cross, Zeke's jaw tightened. Cross. 40, tracker, the best Zeke had ever seen. Could read sign like other men read newspapers. Could follow a trail 3 days cold through running water. He was also a man Zeke had shared campfires with back in the scouting days. Before everything went to hell, state your business, Harrison. Zeke's voice carried across the snow. Echoed off the peaks. You're trespassing on my claim, Harrison chuckled. The sound was like gravel grinding, morning, Thornhill. Didn't expect to find you playing host this far up the rock. We're tracking 3 runaway squaws. Stole a fair bit of property from Mr. Ravencroft down in the basin. We tracked them right to the base of this ridge before the snow covered the tracks. Harrison leaned forward in his saddle. You seen them? Haven't seen a soul in 3 weeks. Just me and the pines up here. You boys turn your horses around before they freeze to the ground. Harrison's smile vanished. He spurred the roan a few steps closer. Now, Thornhill, don't take me for a fool. Cross here says he smells wood smoke and wet wool on the updraft. You don't wear wool. You make your own buckskin. Harrison's hand moved to his rifle. Hand them over. There's a hefty bounty. Ravencroft's willing to split it with you for your cooperation. I told you there's no one here. Zeke slid the Hawken barrel into the firing slot. The movement was slow, deliberate, so they could all see it. Take 1 more step toward this porch, Harrison, and I'll put a ball clean through your chest. It'll leave a hole big enough for a barn owl to fly through. The 3 hired guns instantly raised their rifles, hammers clicking back. The mechanical sound cutting through the morning. Harrison's face flushed red. You're making a mistake, old man. You can't hold off 4 of us. Not for some thieving Indians. Inside the cabin, Deteste stepped closer to Zeke. She reached into the leather satchel, pulled something out, slammed it on the wooden table. The metallic clatter made Zeke glance back. A silver badge, 6-pointed star. Federal Marshal, smeared with dried blood, beside it a thick leather-bound ledger. It's not about horses. Deteste's voice was low, trembling with something between rage and grief. 3 weeks ago, my mother and I were gathering herbs near the reservation border. We heard gunshots. We found a white man dying in the dirt. She picked up the badge, turned it over. The back was engraved, Agent Harrison Webb. U.S. Department of Interior. He told us his name was Harrison Webb. He was a federal agent from Washington. Zeke's blood went cold. He knew the name. Everyone in the territory knew it. Webb had been sent west 6 months ago to investigate reports of Indian affairs, corruption, stolen rations, doctored ledgers, the usual frontier games where white men got rich and red men got dead. Webb died in my arms. Naishi's voice came from near the cellar door. She'd come back up. Standing there with the Colt in her hand, Ravencroft Altmen shot him. 3 bullets, 1 in the belly, 2 in the chest. Why, before he died, he gave us that ledger and his badge. She pointed at the book on the table. The ledger proves Ravencroft has been stealing government rations for 12 years. Starving our people. Reselling the beef and grain to army forts for double the profit. He made over $40,000 while children died. Deteste's hand shook as she opened the ledger. Pages and pages of entries, dates, amounts, names. Ravencroft knows we have the book. He framed us for the fire and the horses, so his men could hunt us legally. If he gets this ledger, the truth dies with us. Zeke stared at the blood-stained badge. He'd spent 7 years running from the corruption and bloodshed of the civilized world. retreating higher and higher into the mountains to escape the endless cycle of greed and murder. But looking at the frightened yet defiant faces of the Apache women, and the undeniable proof of a murdered federal agent resting on his table, he realized something. The world had followed him up the mountain. He couldn't run anymore. Outside, a rifle cracked, the window glass shattered. The bullet buried itself in the log wall inches from Nishi's head. She dropped, hit the floor. The Colt skittered across the boards. Last chance, Thornhill. Harrison's voice was pure venom now. Send them out, or we burn the cabin down with you inside it. Zeke slowly turned his head back to the firing slot. The time for talking was over. He'd known it the moment he opened the door last night. Some choices you make with words, others you make with lid. He thumbed back the hammer on the Hawken. The sound was very loud. In the sudden quiet deteste, she looked up, still crouched by the table, still holding the ledger. Take the window. When I fire, I know what to do. She raised the rifle to her shoulder, sighted through the broken glass. Zeke took a deep breath. Cold air filled his lungs, burned, clarified. He aimed the Hawken at the center of the pine log where Harrison was hiding. Didn't need to hit the man directly. At this, a ball would turn the splintering wood into shrapnel. Lord forgive me. He squeezed the trigger. The Hawken roared. The sound was deafening. A thunderclap that shook dust from the rafters and echoed across the Wind River Range. The pine log exploded. A chunk of timber the size of a man's torso flew backward, caught Luther Pike square in the shoulder. Pike screamed, dropped his rifle, tumbled into the snow, clutching his mangled arm. Return fire. Harrison's voice cracked with panic. Riddle the place. The tree line erupted. Muzzle flashes. Smoke. Heavy lead balls chewing into the oak door. More glass shattering. The cabin filled with the acrid stench of black powder and flying splinters. Keep your heads down. Zeke dropped to one knee. Started reloading. Powder, patch, ball, Romer. His hands moved on muscle memory. 30 years of frontier living meant you could load a rifle in your sleep, or under fire, Detesta didn't flinch. Through the broken window, she tracked the muzzle flashes, exhaled slow, squeezed, the rifle bucked. Smoke poured from the barrel, a heavy thud from the brush. Then, cursing, she clipped me. That was cross. The tracker. The girl's got a rifle. Behind the snow-covered pine, Harrison dragged Pike by his collar. The bounty hunter's face was twisted in rage. This was supposed to be simple. 3 unarmed women, easy money, not a siege. Danny huddled behind a granite boulder to the left. He'd stopped firing, just stared at the blood pooling under Pike. Then at the cabin, then at Harrison. This is madness. His voice carried across the clearing. You said they were just runaways. That old man is Ezekiel Thornhill. They're shooting like they're defending Fort Laramie. He stood up, hands raised. If they've got federal papers in there, we're dancing with the hangman. Harrison turned. Cold, dead eyes locked on Danny. The bounty hunter had long since crossed the line between law and butchery. Loose ends got you killed. Witnesses got you hung. Danny was both. I said suppress the cabin. Harrison drew his Colt. I ain't dying for Ravencroft's stolen beef, Danny shouted it, preparing to surrender to Zeke. To throw down his rifle and beg mercy. Harrison didn't hesitate. The Colt barked once. Danny jerked, stumbled forward, fell face first into the snow. Blood spread beneath him, growing, blooming. Inside the cabin, Zeke watched through the firing slot, watched Harrison shoot his own man in the back. He just killed his own. Zeke's voice was flat. Empty. Harrison isn't leaving here without that ledger, even if he has to burn the mountain down. As if on cue, Harrison pulled something from his saddlebag. A bundle. Cloth wrapped around something heavy. He struck a match on his boot heel. Touched it to the cloth. Flames crawled up the fabric. He hurled it in a high arc. The bundle crashed onto the cedar shingles of the cabin roof. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the world exploded. The dynamite detonated, a sharp concussive blast that shook the foundation. Blew a massive hole in the roof. Burning debris rained down, hit the dry bare rugs. The oil spilled from a shattered lantern. Fire. Everywhere. Thick black smoke billowed through the one-room cabin. Choking. Blinding, we can't hold them in this smoke, Datest coughed, wiped soot from her eyes. Kept the rifle aimed at the door. We aren't going to. Zeke grabbed the ledger, shoved it inside his coat, pulled the trapdoor open. Down, all of you. Now, Nish scrambled for the ladder. Datesti backed toward it, still covering the door, still ready. Zeke fired one last blind shot through the door. Didn't aim, didn't care. Just wanted them to keep their heads down. He descended into the dark, pulled the heavy iron door shut just as the blazing roof beams began to collapse above. In the pitch black of the earthen cellar, Taba was weeping. Soft, muffled, trying to be brave, struck a match, lit a small oil lamp. The flame guttered, steadied, cast dancing shadows on the dirt walls. The cellar was cramped, jars of preserved peaches, cured meat, turnips in burlap sacks, and the back wall. Zeke moved to it, threw aside the wooden crates, revealed a narrow opening, dark, a tunnel carved into the mountain rock. Old silver prospectors dug it. His voice echoed slightly. I cleared it out years ago. Leads straight through the ridge. Comes out 300 yards up the pass. Right beneath Devil's Tooth, Nish stared into the black tunnel mouth. Will they follow? Cross is a bloodhound. Once the fire burns down, he'll find the cellar. We need to be a mile high by the time he does. Zeke pushed the girls into the tunnel. Nishi went next, Zeke went last. He paused at the entrance, looked back at the cellar, his home for 7 years, going up in flames above his head, everything he'd built, everything he'd hidden in burning. He didn't feel sad. He felt lighter. Zeke stepped into the tunnel. Let the darkness swallow him. Behind him, the cabin groaned. The roof collapsed with a crash that shook the mountain, and Ezekiel Thornhill walked away from his coffin toward whatever came next. The tunnel smelled like death and silver. Not fresh death, old death. The kind that had been sitting in rock for decades, waiting for someone stupid enough to disturb it. Zeke led with the oil lamp held high. The flame threw shadows that crawled up the walls like living things. Behind him, Nishe breathed hard. Then Dateste. Then Taba, who hadn't stopped crying since they entered the dark. The passage was narrow, barely 3 feet wide, carved by men who'd believed fortunes waited in the mountain. They'd been wrong. The silver played out in 1842. The miners left. The tunnel stayed waiting. Zeke had found it 5 years ago while digging a cold spring. Followed it all the way through the ridge. Came out on the other side, near a formation called Devil's Tooth. A spire of granite that looked like a fang stabbing at heaven. He'd never told anyone about the tunnel. Now it was the only reason they weren't burning alive. How far? Datest's voice bounced off stone. 1/4 mile, maybe less. The lamplight caught something on the wall. Zeke stopped, held the flame closer. Names, carved into rock, not the miners. These were newer, his work. 7 years of chisel and gilt. William Crowfoot, 6 years, died winter 1852. Hannah Brightwater, 9 years, died spring 1853. Jacob Redbird, 11 years, died winter 1854. On and on. 120 names, give or take. Zeke had lost count around 80, just kept carving. Every child who'd starved because Augustus Ravencroft decided theft was easier than honesty. Nisha's hand touched the wall. Her fingers traced letters, found one name. Stopped Mary Greyhawk, 8 years, died winter 1852. Her daughter, Distis' sister, dead. 6 years before Zeke carved her name, but he'd carved it anyway, because someone needed to remember, and God clearly wasn't paying attention. You did this. Nisha's voice was barely a whisper. You carved all these names. Zeke didn't answer. What was there to say? Yes. I carved them. I carved them because I couldn't save them. Because I led soldiers to your village for $50, and your husband died, and I went home and found my own son, dead from the same fever that killed him. Because Ravencroft's stolen rations meant no medicine, no food, no hope. So yes, I carved the names every winter, every child. Every life Ravencroft's greed had consumed. 7 years. Nisha's hand stayed on her daughter's name. You've been up here 7 years carving dead children. Someone had to remember. Dasti moved closer. Her fingers found another name, Samuel Thornhill, 11 years, died spring 1851. She looked at Zeke, understanding dawning in her fierce stare. Your son, not a question. Yes, the word came out sharp. Broken. Like stepping on glass, Taba had stopped crying. She stared at the wall, at the endless list of names. Children she'd never meet, would never meet, because they were stone now. Memory. Letters in rock that would outlast everyone who'd loved them. We need to keep moving. Zeke started walking. The lamp swung. Shadows danced. The names disappeared behind them, but he felt their weight. Always did. Carrying them was easier than forgetting them. The tunnel sloped upward. Got colder. The air thinned. At 10,000 feet, every breath was work. At 11,000, it was war. Tuesta stumbled, caught herself on the wall. Her breathing was ragged. How much further? We're close. Zeke could see light ahead, not lamplight. Real light. Gray and cold but real. The exit, they emerged onto a rocky ledge overlooking the valley. Below them, smoke rose from where the cabin used to be, a black column against pristine snow. Zeke watched it climb toward the sky and felt nothing. 7 years in that cabin. 7 years talking to ghosts. 7 years waiting to die. Good riddance. Where now? Nishi pulled Taba close. The girl was shaking. Not from cold. From exhaustion. From fear. From being 12 years old and watching the world try to kill her. Devil's tooth. We climb to the overhang. Wait for them to pass underneath. Then we make for the high pass. Detesta scanned the tree line below. Her rifle ready, they'll follow. I know. We can't outrun them. Not with Taba, I know. So what's the plan? Zeke looked at her. This 17-year-old girl who'd learned to kill before she learned to read. This child warrior who shouldn't exist, but did because the world made monsters necessary. We survive. Everything else is negotiable. They climbed. The snow was waist-deep here. Every step was agony. Zeke broke trail, used his body weight and the rifle butt to carve a path. Behind him the women followed, single file, using his footprints. Taba fell twice. Nish hauled her up, kept moving, no words, just brutal forward motion. 2 hours of climbing. The sun climbed with them, turned the snow into blinding white fire. Zeke's eyes burned. His lungs screamed. His leg muscles felt like they'd been replaced with broken glass. But he kept moving. Because stopping meant dying, and he'd promised Samuel he'd finish the list first. Still had names to carve. A rifle shot cracked across the ridge. The bullet skipped off granite 2 feet from Zeke's head. Stone fragments exploded. Cut his cheek. Blood ran hot down his face. Froze almost immediately. He threw himself into a snowbank. Dragged Taba down with him. They found the tunnel. Detest dropped to her stomach. Crawled to the ridge edge. Peered over, 300 yards below. Struggling through the trench Zeke had carved. 2 riders. Harrison on the big roan, and Cross on a gray mare. Where was Pike? Dead, probably. Or left behind. Didn't matter. 2 was still too many. Harrison raised his rifle. Fired again. The ball whined overhead. Buried itself in a snowdrift. Keep moving. Zeke hauled Taba up. Shoved her toward Nishi. Get to the overhang. Go, Nishi grabbed her daughter. Started climbing. Detesti backed up the slope. Rifle aimed downward. Ready, move. Zeke's voice cracked like a whip. She moved. Zeke wedged himself behind a frozen stump. Laid the Hawken across the wood. Watched Harrison and Cross struggle upward through hip-deep powder. They were gaining slowly. But gaining, Zeke sighted down the barrel. Waited for Harrison to clear the trees. Steady. Steady. Harrison stepped into the open. Zeke squeezed. The Hawken roared. Smoke billowed. The ball sang through cold air. Missed. Hit a tree trunk 3 inches to Harrison's left. The bounty hunter dove for cover. Started laughing. The sound carried up the mountain. Manic. Delighted. You're getting old, Thornhill. Used to be you could hit a rabbit at 300 yards. Zeke reloaded. Hands shaking. From cold. From exhaustion. From being 52 and realizing his body didn't work like it used to. Another shot from below. This one from cross. The tracker didn't miss. The ball tore through the fleshy part of Zeke's left thigh. Punched clean through. He felt the impact before the pain. Like being kicked by a mule. Then the pain arrived. White hot, searing, exploding down his leg. He bit down on his lip. Tasted copper. Kept from screaming by sheer force of will. Blood poured from the wound. Bright crimson against snow. Steam rose from it. Zeke pulled his belt loose. Wrapped it around his upper thigh. Cinched it tight. The bleeding slowed. Didn't stop. But slowed good enough. He tried to stand. His leg buckled. He went down hard. Face first into snow. Can't do this. Too old, too slow, too broken, Sarah's voice in his head. Or maybe his own, hard to tell anymore. Get up, can't get up, or Taba dies. Naishi dies. Dateste dies. Everyone dies because you're lying in the snow feeling sorry for yourself. Get up. Zeke got up. Used the rifle as a crutch. Hobbled upward. Each step was a fresh scream from his thigh. Each step left blood in the snow. A trail any fool could follow. Which meant Cross would have no trouble at all. A head Detest appeared over a ridge. Saw him. Saw the blood. Her face went white. You're hit, noticed. She scrambled down. Got under his arm. Took his weight. Can you walk? I'm walking. Can you run? Not even a little. They made it to the overhang. A massive shelf of rock jutting out from the mountain face. Below it a sheer drop. 60 feet straight down to a slope covered in deep powder. Naish had Taba wrapped in both buffalo robes. The girl was unconscious. Hypothermia, probably. Her lips were blue. Her breathing shallow. She needs warmth. Naishi's voice was steady, controlled. The kind of control that came from watching people die and knowing panic made it worse. We need to keep moving. Zeke collapsed against the rock wall. His leg was on fire. The belt tourniquet was soaked through. Blood dripped onto stone. Datste ripped a strip from her tunic. Started wrapping the wound properly. We're not going anywhere. You can't walk. Taba can't wake up. And they're 5 minutes behind us. She tied off the bandage. Looked at Zeke. What do we do? Good question. Zeke looked up. Directly above them hung a massive cornice of snow. Thousands of tons of packed ice and powder clinging to the cliff face. The blizzard 2 nights ago had loaded the ridge to its breaking point. One loud noise. One sharp impact, the whole thing would come down. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small canvas bundle. Half a pound of black powder wrapped in oilcloth. He used it for clearing stumps, breaking rock. The kind of thing you needed when you lived alone at 10,000 feet. The fuse was short. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Enough. You're not. Detest saw what he was thinking. You'll kill yourself. Probably. Then don't. They're coming, he could hear them now. Boots crunching on snow. Heavy breathing. Getting closer. There has to be another way. There isn't. Zeke struck a match. The wind tried to kill it. He cupped his hand, protected the flame. Touched it to the fuse. It caught, hissed. Sputtered sparks. Get back, all of you. Behind the rock, Naish grabbed Taba. Deteste grabbed her mother. They scrambled behind the overhang. Zeke stood, legs screaming, vision blurring. Below him, Harrison and Cross crested the ridge, saw him, raised their rifles. Or you're done, Thornhill! Harrison's voice was triumph, and rage mixed. I'm going to take my time with you. Then I'm going after the squaws. Zeke looked at the burning fuse in his hand. 2 seconds left, looked at the massive cornice above Harrison and Cross. Looked at Datsy peeking around the rock. Those eyes. Same fear he'd seen in Samuel's eyes when the fever took him. Not again, not this time. Zeke hurled the bundle straight up. Put everything he had left into the throw. Watched it arc against the sky. A small black dot trailing smoke. What in hell? Cross looked up, saw it coming down, started to run. Too late. The powder bomb detonated 30 feet above the cornice. The explosion was sharp. Concussive. A crack like God's hammer hitting stone. For 1 second nothing happened. Then the mountain groaned deep. Terrifying. A sound that vibrated through bedrock and bone. The cornice detached started slow. A cascade. Then faster. Then a roaring tidal wave of white death. Harrison and Cross didn't scream, didn't have time. The avalanche hit them like a locomotive made of ice, swallowed them whole, buried them under millions of tons of crushing weight. The wave kept coming, snapped century-old pines like twigs, roared down the slope, consumed everything in its path. Zeke felt the overhang shake, felt the rock groan. Thought for a second they were going with it. Then it passed. The thunder faded, echoed off distant peaks. Died, silence, Bosul. Profound. Zeke slid down the wall, sat in the snow, breathing hard, leg pulsing with every heartbeat. D'Este emerged from cover, looked over the edge. The entire slope below was buried under fresh avalanche debris. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. They're gone. Her voice was small. Distant, Nish appeared, still holding Taba. The girl's eyes fluttered. Open, Mama? I'm here, little one. Taba looked around, confused. Saw the devastation below. What happened? The mountain spoke, and the bad men listened. Zeke closed his eyes, let his head fall back against stone. Every part of him hurt. His leg worst of all, but everything else wasn't far behind. 52 years old. Shot. Exhausted. Freezing. Still alive. Somehow. Can you walk? D'Este knelt beside him. Her hands were gentle on his leg, checking the wound. Give me a minute. We don't have a minute. The avalanche might have buried Harrison and Cross, but it didn't bury the bounty. Ravencroft will send more, I know. So we need to move, I know. But knowing and doing were different things. Zeke tried to stand, got halfway up, his leg gave out. He went down hard. D'Este caught him. Barely. You need help. I need a new leg. She didn't smile. Fort Laramie is 2 days east. If we can get to Major Stone. Stone won't help. The words came out flat. Final. What? Thaddeus Stone. Major. Fort Laramie. Good man. Or used to be. Zeke pulled the ledger from his coat, opened it, flipped to page 34. There, in neat handwriting, Major T. Stone, Fort Laramie, 300 June 1854. D'Este stared at the entry. Then at Zeke. He's on the list. Everyone's on the list. That's how Ravencroft works. He doesn't threaten, doesn't force, just offers money. And men take it. Because money's easy. Conscience is hard. Nish moved closer. Read the entry over D'Este's shoulder. If we can't trust the fort, then where do we go? Zeke closed the ledger, looked at the three of them. An old woman, a girl warrior, a 12-year-old who'd nearly frozen to death twice in as many days, and him. A 52-year-old mountain man with a bullet hole in his leg and 7 years of guilt carved into stone. Some rescue party. We go to the fort anyway. D'Este's eyes narrowed. You just said. I said Stone's on the list. I didn't say he'd stay on it. Zeke struggled to his feet. Used the rifle as a crutch. Started hobbling east. Men do bad things for good reasons. Stone probably needed money for something. Sick wife. Debs. Doesn't matter. Point is he took Ravencroft's coin. But he's not like Harrison. He's not like Pike or Cross. He's a soldier. Which means he still believes in things like duty and honor, even if he buried them for a while. Nishi helped support him. Took some weight off the bad leg, and if you're wrong, if he turns us over to Ravencroft, then we die. But we die trying, which is better than dying here. They walked. Slow. Painful. Every step agony for Zeke. Every breath a battle at this altitude. But they walked, because stopping meant freezing. Freezing meant dying. And Zeke had spent 7 years waiting to die. Turned out when death finally showed up, he wasn't ready after all. The sun climbed toward noon, turned the snow into molten silver. Blinding, beautiful, brutal. Taba walked on her own now, still weak but conscious, alert. She held her mother's hand, didn't let go. D'Este ranged ahead, scouting, watching for riders, for threats, for anything that might kill them before they reached the fort. Zeke limped behind, each step leaving blood drops in the snow, a trail anyone could follow. But there was no one left to follow. Harrison buried under 10 feet of avalanche debris. Cross beside him. Pike probably dead from his wounds. Danny shot in the back by his own commander. 4 men came up the mountain. 4 men stayed good. Zeke's leg buckled again. He went down. Couldn't catch himself. Hit the snow face first, Naishe crouched beside him, turned him over. Her weathered face was creased with concern. "You're getting worse, I'm fine. You're bleeding through the bandage. The wound needs proper care." "Cauterization, probably." I said I'm fine, but he wasn't. They both knew it. The cold was getting into the wound. Infection would follow. Then fever. Then death. Unless they reached the fort, unless Stone helped, unless 100 things went right that had no business going right. "Why are you doing this?" Naishi's question hung in the cold air. Doing what? Helping us. You could have turned us away. Could have stayed in your cabin. Lived out your days carving names and talking to ghosts. Zeke looked at her. This old Apache woman who'd lost a husband and a daughter. And God knew what else but kept walking anyway. 7 years ago, I led soldiers to your village. The words came slow. Heavy. They paid me $50. I took it. Your husband died. I went home and found my son dying from the same fever that killed him. Because Ravencroft had stolen the rations that would have bought medicine. He sat up. Snow clung to his beard. Ice crystals in the gray. I spent 7 years carving names because I couldn't save them. But you knocked on my door. And I realized something. Naishi waited. I can't bring back the dead. Can't undo what I did. But I can make sure no more names get carved. Starting with yours. Starting with Dateste's. Starting with Taba's. He pushed himself up. Used Naishe's shoulder for support. So that's why I'm doing this. Because you knocked. And I finally answered. They kept walking. The sun started its descent. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped. At night it would hit 20 below. Maybe 30. They needed shelter. Dastet found it. An overhang of rock that blocked the wind. Not warm, but better than open air. They huddled together. Shared body heat. Naishi wrapped Taba in all 3 buffalo robes. The girl fell asleep almost instantly. Zeke sat with his back against stone. Legs stretched out. The wound had stopped bleeding, but only because there wasn't much blood left. He felt cold. Not surface cold. Deep cold. The kind that started in your bones and worked outward. Bod sign. Dateste settled beside him. Rifle across her knees. Tell me about him. Who? Your son. Samuel. Zeke was quiet for a long time, listening to the wind, to Taba's breathing, to his own heart beating slower than it should. He liked rocks. Collected them. Had maybe 50 different kinds. Could tell you where each one came from, what it was made of. He was 11, but he knew more about geology than men twice his age. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Wanted to be a surveyor. Map the whole territory. Find silver, gold. Make us rich. The smile faded. Then the fever came. Ravencroft had stolen the shipment of medicine meant for the fort. Sold it to settlements further east for triple the price. By the time we got word, there was no quinine left anywhere in the territory. His voice went flat. Sarah tried everything. Cold compresses. Willow bark tea. Prayer. Nothing worked. He died in 3 days. She followed a week later. Different fever. Same result. Datest was silent. I buried them on the mountain. Went back to the cabin. Found my old chisel. Started carving names. Every child who died that winter. Samuel was number 47. He looked at her. You were 10 when I led the soldiers to your village? She nodded. I remember. It was spring. We were planting corn. Then the blue coats came. Burned everything. Father tried to stop them. They shot him. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate. Useless. But they were all he had. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence. 2 people bound by grief and guilt and a dead federal agent's ledger. Finally, Dateste spoke. When we get to the fort, when we give Stone the ledger. What happens to you? What do you mean? You killed 4 of Ravencroft's men. Destroyed his operation. There'll be consequences, Zeke shrugged. I've been dead 7 years. If they hang me, I'll just be making it official. That's not funny. Wasn't trying to be. She turned to face him. Those fierce eyes serious. You opened the door. You let us in. You carved my sister's name. You can't give up now. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. Men like me don't get happy endings. Men like you? Broken. Used up. Haunted. Dast shook her head. That's not what I see. Then what do you see? Someone who finally stopped running. Morning came hard and cold. Zeke's leg was worse, swollen. Hot to the touch despite the freezing air. Infection, definitely infection, he could barely stand. Couldn't walk without support. Naishe and Datest took turns, one on each side. Taba walked behind, carrying the rifles, the ledger, everything else. They made maybe a mile in 3 hours. Not good enough. The fort was still a full day away. Maybe more at this pace. Zeke was slowing them down. He knew it. They knew it. No one said it. Around noon, Deteste stopped. Listen. Zeke listened. Heard nothing but wind. What? Hoofbeats. Then he heard it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Horses. Multiple. Coming from the west, more bounty hunters. Naish pulled Taba close. How many? Datest climbed a small rise. Scanned the tree line. 3 riders. Maybe 4. Too far to tell. Zeke looked around. Open ground. No cover. Nowhere to hide. Even if they could run, they'd be spotted in seconds. They were caught. Give me the rifle. Datest handed it over. Zeke, check the load. Pan primed. Hammer back. Take Taba. Get to those rocks. He pointed at a small outcropping 50 yards east. What about you? I'll slow them down. Buy you time. You can barely walk. Don't need to walk to shoot. Naish grabbed his arm. This is suicide. Maybe. But it's my choice. No go. He pushed them away. Hobbled toward a fallen log, took position behind it. Laid the rifle across the wood. Sighted downrange. The hoofbeats got louder. Closer. Zeke's finger found the trigger. This was it. Last stand. Mountain Man versus whoever Ravencroft sent next. Not how he'd pictured dying. But then again, he'd stopped picturing anything years ago. The riders crested the rise. 4 of them blue coats. Army Zeke's breath caught. The lead rider pulled up short. Raised a hand. The others halted. Ezekiel Thornhill? The voice was familiar. Rough. Exhausted. Zeke squinted. Recognized the face. Major Thaddeus Stone, Fort Laramie. The man whose name was on page 34 of the ledger. The man they were going to for help. Here now. Stone? The major dismounted. Walked forward slowly. Hands visible. No weapons drawn. Put the rifle down. Zeke. We're not here to fight. Then why are you here? Stone stopped 10 feet away. Looked at the blood-soaked bandage on Zeke's leg. At the rifle shaking in his grip. At the exhaustion carved into his face. Because a young man named Danny rode into the fort last night. Told me everything. About Harrison. About the ledger. About 3 Apache women running for their lives. He took another step. About a mountain man who decided enough was enough. Zeke lowered the rifle. You're on the list, Stone. Page 34. $300. June 1854. The major flinched, but didn't deny it, I know. My wife needed surgery. I didn't have the money. Ravencroft offered. I took it. I've regretted it every day since. He met Zeke's eyes, but that stops today. Danny said, you have the ledger, the proof. Everything we need to bring Ravencroft down. Zeke nodded toward the rocks, where Naishi and Datest were hiding. They have it. Stone raised his voice. Mrs. Greyhawk, I give you my word. You and your daughters are under the protection of the United States Army. Please, come out. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Naishi emerged. Dateste beside her. Taba between them. Stone approached slowly, respectfully. Stopped a few feet away, ma'am. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I swear on my wife's grave I will see justice done. Ravencroft will answer for his crimes. Your husband will be avenged. Those children will be remembered. Dasatek pulled the ledger from her coat. Held it out. Stone took it. Opened it. His face went white as he read Nymams. Dates, amounts. 12 years of systematic theft. Thousands dead. Children, elders, entire families. And there, page 34, his own name, his own shame. God forgive me. His voice broke. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was this. He closed the ledger. Looked at them all. We ride for the fort now. Zeke needs a surgeon. You all need food, rest, safety. And then we're going to make damn sure Augustus Ravencroft hangs for every name in this book. Fort Laramie sat on the North Platte River like a clenched fist. Wooden walls, guard towers. The American flag snapping in wind that never stopped blowing. Zeke had been here before. Years ago. Back when he still believed in institutions. In order. In the idea that men wearing uniforms were somehow better than men without them. He'd learned different. But here he was again. Riding through the gates on a horse that wasn't his. Leg wrapped in fresh bandages, soaked with carbolic acid that burned worse than the bullet hole. The fort surgeon had dug out the ball. Cauterized the wound. Given him laudanum for the pain. Zeke refused it. Needed his mind clear. Needed to see this through. Stone led them to the headquarters building. 2-story log construction. Officers' quarters upstairs. Command post below. Inside smelled like ink and tobacco and old decisions. Stone gestured to chairs around a heavy oak table. Sit, please. Nish sank into chair. Gravity had finally caught up with her. 3 weeks of running. 3 weeks of looking over her shoulder. 3 weeks of keeping her daughters alive through sheer force of will. Now she could rest. Maybe. Este remained standing. Rifle still in hand. She trusted Stone about as far as she could throw him. Which at 17 and exhausted wasn't very far at all. Taba curled up in a corner. Eyes half closed. Not sleeping. Just shutting out a world that had tried very hard to kill her. Stone placed the ledger on the table. Opened it. Stared at the entries like they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. They didn't. I need to ask you something. Stone looked at Nishi. And I need the truth. I have given you nothing but truth, Agent Webb. When he died. Did he say anything else? Anything about who else knew he was investigating? Ravencroft. Nash closed her eyes. Remembered, he said Ravencroft had people everywhere. In the territorial government, in the army, in Washington. He said the only way to stop him was to make the ledger public. Force a trial. Make it too big to bury. She opened her eyes, then he died. And we ran. Stone nodded slowly. Turned to a younger officer standing by the door. Lieutenant Carson. I want every available man assembled in 1 hour. Full kit. We're riding to Ravencroft's ranch. Carson's eyes widened. Sir? That's an order. Lieutenant, yes, sir. Carson left. Fast. Stone looked at Zeke. Can you ride? I can sit on a horse. Whether that counts as riding is debatable. Good enough. You're coming with us? Why? Because you're the only witness to Harrison's crimes. Who's still breathing. And because when we arrest Augustus Ravencroft, I want him to see the man who brought him down. Ravencroft's ranch sprawled across 10,000 acres of prime grazing land. Cattle, hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. Fat, healthy, worth a fortune. Built on stolen grain. Purchased with blood money. Fertilized with the bones of children who'd starved, so Augustus Ravencroft could add another zero to his bank account. The main house was 3 stories, white clapboard. Columns. Like some plantation owner had gotten lost and ended up in Wyoming. Stone rode at the head of 30 soldiers. Zeke beside him. Nishi and her daughters in a wagon behind them. Protected, but present. This wasn't a secret raid, this was a reckoning. The gates to the ranch stood open. No guards, no resistance, which made Zeke nervous. Too easy, Stone nodded. I know. Keep your eyes open. They rode into the courtyard, dismounted, boots on gravel. Rifles ready, the front door opened. Augustus Ravencroft stepped out 60 years old. Silver hair, expensive suit. Face like a banker who'd foreclosed on your farm, then invited you to dinner. He looked at Stone, at the soldiers. At the wagon carrying 3 Apache women. Smiled Major Stone. To what do I owe the pleasure? Augustus Ravencroft. You're under arrest for theft of government property. Embezzlement, fraud. And conspiracy to murder a federal agent. Ravencroft's smile didn't waver. That's quite a list. I assume you have evidence. Stone pulled the ledger from his coat, held it up, 12 years' worth. Every theft, every bribe, every name, including Major T. Stone, page 34, $300. June 1854. The smile finally cracked. You're arresting yourself? I'm testifying against you. There's a difference. Ravencroft descended the steps. Slow, controlled. A man used to being in charge. You think this will work? You think a military tribunal will convict me? I own half the territorial government. The other half owes me favors, maybe. But the ledger's already on its way to Washington. Copy went out on this morning's stage. By the time your lawyers get involved, this will be front-page news from here to New York. Ravencroft stopped. The control slipped. Just for a second. Long enough for Zeke to see the panic underneath. You're bluffing. Am I? They stared at each other. Two men who'd played the game. One trying to leave it. The other trying to stay in it. Ravencroft broke first. Fine. Arrest me. Put me on trial. I'll be out in 6 months. And when I am, every single person who testified against me will regret it. He looked at Naishe. Especially you and your half-breed daughters. Detest was off the wagon and moving before anyone could stop her. Rifle raised. Finger on the trigger. Say that again. Ravencroft didn't flinch. Half-breed. Mongrel. Savage. Take your pick, Detesty. Zeke's voice was quiet. Steady, don't. He killed my father, killed my sister. Killed Webb. He deserves to die. He does. But not by your hand. Not like this. She didn't lower the rifle. Why not? Because then you become what he thinks you are. And you're better than that. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Detesty lowered the rifle, stepped back. Ravencroft laughed. Good dog. Knows when to heel. This time it was Stone who moved. Fast. His fist connected with Ravencroft's jaw. The older man went down hard, blood on his lips, resisting arrest. I'll add it to the list. Stone gestured to 2 soldiers. Take him. Shackles. He doesn't speak to anyone. Doesn't write to anyone. Full isolation until the tribunal. They hauled Ravencroft to his feet, marched him to a supply wagon, locked him in the back. Zeke watched it happen. Felt nothing. No satisfaction. No justice. Just emptiness. 7 years he'd waited for this. 7 years of carving names and imagining the day Ravencroft would pay. Now it was happening, and it felt like nothing. You all right? Stone stood beside him. No, didn't think so. The tribunal convened in the fort's chapel. Only space large enough. Pews removed. Tables set up. 3 judges behind a long bench. All Army. All career officers who'd served on the frontier and seen what men like Ravencroft did. The prosecution table held Stone. A young jaggy lawyer named Winters. And the ledger the defense table held Ravencroft. 2 expensive lawyers from St. Louis. And an arrogance that filled the room like smoke. Zeke sat in the gallery. Naishe beside him. Detesty on the other side. Taba between her mother and sister. Protected. Always protected, the head judge banged his gavel. This tribunal will come to order. We are convened to hear evidence in the matter of the United States versus Augustus Ravencroft. Charges include theft of government property, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. He looked at the defense table. How does the defendant plead? Ravencroft stood, shoulders back. Head high, not guilty to all charges, so noted. Major Stone, your opening statement. Stone rose, walked to the center of the room. No notes, no theatrics. Just facts, gentlemen. Over the past 12 years, Augustus Ravencroft has stolen over $60,000 in government rations intended for the Shoshone, Arapaho, and Apache peoples. He resold those goods for personal profit. The result was systematic starvation, disease, death. He held up the ledger. This book contains every transaction, every bribe, every theft. It was compiled by Federal Agent Harrison Webb, who was murdered by Mr. Ravencroft's employees. To prevent this information from becoming public, he set the ledger on the judge's bench. The evidence is clear. The crimes are documented. Justice demands a reckoning. He sat. The defense lawyers stood. Older, gray-haired, voice like honey over gravel. Gentlemen, my client is a rancher, a businessman, a pillar of this community. The so-called evidence presented by the prosecution comes from a dead federal agent of questionable reputation, and 3 Apache women who have every reason to lie. He gestured at Naishe. Mrs. Greyhawk claims Agent Webb gave her this ledger as he died. But where were the witnesses? Where is the proof she didn't manufacture this document herself? Naisha's hands tightened on the armrest. Detesty put a hand over hers, held it, kept her still. The lawyer continued. Furthermore, the prosecution's key witness is Ezekiel Thornhill, a hermit. A man who has lived in isolation for 7 years. His testimony is unreliable at best. Zeke felt eyes on him. Didn't react. Just sat. Let the words wash over him. True. Some of them. The hermit part. The isolation. The rest was lies, but lies were what lawyers did. The defense will prove that this entire case is a fabrication. A conspiracy by disgruntled individuals to destroy a respected businessman. We ask that all charges be dismissed. He sat. The judges conferred. Whispered. Finally, the head judge spoke. The tribunal will hear testimony. Prosecution may call its first witness. Stone stood. The United States calls Nishi Greyhawk. Nish rose. Walked to the witness chair. Sat with her back straight. Head high. A woman who'd survived hell and refused to be broken by it. The young lawyer Winters approached. Mrs. Greyhawk. Please tell the court what happened on the night of November 3rd, 1858. Nish's voice was steady. My daughters and I were gathering herbs near the reservation border. We heard gunshots. We ran toward the sound. Found a white man bleeding in the dirt. Did he identify himself? Yes. He said his name was Harrison Webb, federal agent. Department of Interior. What else did he say? He said he'd been investigating Augustus Ravencroft. Had found proof of 12 years of theft. Said Ravencroft's men shot him to keep him quiet. What did he give you? A ledger, and his badge. Told me to get it to the army, to make sure the truth came out. Then what happened?
He died. We buried him.
Started. Ravencroft's men came after us. Put a bounty on our heads. $800 dead or alive. Winters held up the badge. The blood still visible. Is this the badge Agent Webb gave you? Yes. And this ledger? Yes. Winters returned to his table. The defense lawyer stood. Mrs. Greyhawk. How do we know you're telling the truth? Why would I lie? For money. For revenge. For any number of reasons. I have no money. And if I wanted revenge, I would have shot Mr. Ravencroft myself. Scattered laughter from the gallery. The judge banged his gavel. The defense lawyer tried again. You claim Agent Webb gave you this ledger, but you have no witnesses. No proof beyond your word. I have the ledger. I have the badge. What more proof do you need? Physical evidence can be manufactured. Stolen. Forged. Nish leaned forward. Eyes blazing. My husband is dead because of that man. My daughter is dead because of that man. 120 children are dead because of that man. You want proof? Count the graves. The courtroom went silent. The defense lawyer sat down. Winters called Deteste next. She testified about finding Webb, about running, about 7 towns closing their doors, about Zeke opening his. Then Zeke was called. He limped to the stand, legs still healing, still hurting, sat heavily. Winters approached. Mr. Thornhill. You live at 10,000 feet in the Wind River Range, alone. Why? Zeke's throat was dry. Because my wife and son died 7 years ago. And I didn't want to be around people anymore. What changed? 3 people knocked on my door in a blizzard. I opened it. Simple as that? Simple as that. Winters pulled out a sheet of paper. A copy of 1 page from the ledger, Mr. Thornhill. Can you read the entry for April 1851? Zeke took the paper. Read E. Thornhill, scout fee $50. Location intel, Apache village, South Pass. His hands shook. That's you, isn't it? Yes, you led soldiers to an Apache village. For $50? Yes, why? Because I needed the money. Because I thought I was doing the right thing. Because I was a fool. What happened to that village? It was destroyed. The people were relocated. Many died. Including Nishi Greyhawk's husband. Murmurs from the gallery. The judges leaned forward. Winters pressed. So you helped Ravencroft. You took his money. Why should we believe you now? Because I spent 7 years carving the names of the children who died because of what I did. Because I can't bring them back, but I can make sure their deaths meant something. Because when those 3 women knocked on my door, I finally had a chance to stop being part of the problem and start being part of the solution. He looked at Ravencroft. I helped you once. I won't make that mistake again. The defense lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mr. Thornhill, you've admitted to being a hermit, living alone. Some might say you're not of sound mind. Some might say that. They'd be half right. You killed 4 men in the past 2 weeks. Doesn't that make you a murderer? They were trying to kill me and 3 unarmed women. That makes it self-defense, or the actions of a paranoid man living in isolation. Zeke stood. The movement was painful. Slow, but deliberate. I am many things. Broken. Guilty. But I'm not a liar. And I'm not crazy. I know what I did. I know what Ravencroft did. And I know which one of us should be in shackles. He sat back down. The defense lawyer had no more questions. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. Zeke spent it outside. Sitting on the chapel steps, watching the sun move across the sky, Dite sat beside him. Do you think they'll convict? I don't know. What happens if they don't? We keep fighting. For how long? As long as it takes. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you for what? For opening the door. Zeke looked at her. This girl who'd become a warrior because the world demanded it. Who'd learned to kill before she learned to hope. I should have opened it 7 years ago. For your father. For your sister. For all of them. But you didn't. You opened it for us. That's enough. The chapel door opened. Stone stepped out. They have a verdict. The judges filed back in. Faces unreadable. Professional. Cold. Everyone stood. The head judge spoke. Augustus Ravencroft. This tribunal finds you guilty on all charges. Theft of government property, embezzlement, fraud. Conspiracy to commit murder. Ravencroft's face went white. Sentencing will be carried out immediately. You are hereby sentenced to death by hanging. Sentenced to be executed at dawn 3 days hence. The gavel fell. Ravencroft lunged across the table. Soldiers grabbed him, held him back. You can't do this. I have rights. I'll appeal. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Stone's voice cut through the chaos. It's over. You're done. The children you killed finally have justice. They dragged Ravencroft out, still screaming, still fighting. The courtroom emptied slowly. People filing out, whispering, processing. Zeke stayed seated, watching it all happen, feeling that same emptiness. Justice. Finally, after 7 years, after 120 names, after so much death and pain and loss, justice. So why did it feel like nothing? Nish touched his shoulder. Come, let's go. Where? Somewhere we can rest. All of us. 3 months later, early spring 1859, the cabin sat at the eastern edge of Fort Laramie territory. Small, 1 room, built from fresh-cut pine, but it had windows, real glass. Light poured in every morning, and the door. The door stayed open. Zeke sat on the porch he'd built himself. Legs still ached, probably always would, but he could walk, could work, could build, could live. Across the clearing, Nishi stood outside a larger structure, not quite finished, walls up. Roof on, floor being laid. A school. She was teaching 3 Apache children their letters, using a slate board, chalk. Patience.test worked nearby, showing 2 Shoshone boys how to track, how to read sign, how to survive. Skills that kept people alive. Skills she'd learned the hard way. Taba sat on a stump, writing. Her letters were shaky but improving. She was learning to spell the names Zeke had carved, making sure they were remembered not just in stone but in ink. In history, Stone visited yesterday. Brought news Ravencroft had been executed on schedule. His estate seized. The money distributed to the tribes he'd stolen from. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something. The list of names from the ledger had been published in newspapers across the country. Caused a scandal. 3 governors resigned. A dozen judges were removed. The entire Indian Affairs Department was investigated. Real change. Slow. Incomplete. But happening. Taba ran up to the porch, waving a piece of paper. Mr. Zeke, look. I wrote Samuel's name, she showed him. The letters were crooked, some backwards, but readable. Samuel Thornhill, and below it in Taba's careful hand. He was loved. Something in Zeke's chest tightened. His eyes burned. That's perfect, little one. Can I show Mama? Of course, she ran off. Energy unlimited. Hope unlimited. Nish came over after the children were dismissed. Sat beside him on the porch. They watched the sun move toward the mountains. She's doing well, They all are. You're a good teacher. I'm learning as I go, aren't we all? They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd survived the unsurvivable. Who'd fought when fighting seemed pointless. Who'd opened doors when every instinct said keep them locked. Do you still talk to them? Naishi's question was gentle. Sarah and Samuel? Yes, sometimes. Less than I used to. I think they're finally resting. Good. They deserve it. So do you. Zeke looked at the school, at the children, at the life that had somehow grown from all that death. 7 years I spent carving names, making sure they weren't forgotten. I thought that was my penance. My purpose, he gestured at the school, at Naishe, at to stay teaching, at Taba writing, but this, teaching their children, making sure the next generation doesn't have their names carved. This is better, Naishe smiled. The door you opened that night, it saved us. But it also saved you, I know. She stood, brushed dirt from her skirt. Dinner soon. Detesti is making stew, venison? What else? Naish walked back toward the school. Zeke, watch her go. He stood. His leg protested. He ignored it, walked to the edge of the porch, looked at the door of his cabin spalling wide open, sunlight streaming through. No ghosts sighed, just space. Light. Possibility. Zeke had spent 7 years in a coffin waiting to die. Then 3 people knocked, and he opened the door. And life walked in. Behind him the mountains stood silent. The snow on the peaks was melting, spring coming, green returning, and somewhere in the rock beneath Devil's Tooth, 120 names waited in the dark, not forgotten, never forgotten, but finally at peace. Because the man who carved them had stopped counting the dead and started counting the living instead. The door stayed open, and that made all the difference.